Hey there, I'm Micah Peterson, and this is my oral presentation. The subject of my paper for this semester was gaming addiction and why it's such a serious problem. As humanity's technology continues to advance, the problem of video game addiction is only going to increase because more and more video games are being produced, and there's more reason to play them, and they become more common in our society. Video game addiction can result in addicts being consumed in the world of video games, and they'll start to neglect things around them. As a person plays video games, when they achieve a goal, such as solving a puzzle or beating a boss, it releases the chemical dopamine in their brain, which makes them feel good. But the more video games one plays, the less dopamine the brain produces. So this results in a person playing more and more video games until the point where they're not really getting any dopamine, and they're just stuck in an endless cycle of trying to get that dopamine rush but without actually getting to anything. And the more they play video games, the more they neglect the world around them. They'll neglect family members, their own job maybe, even their own physical health, or mental health for that matter. And that can result in damaged relationships, as a person starts to ignore their friends and family. They'll interact with them less, and when they do interact, they may act even aggressive or just generally negative because all they can think about is video games, and trying to get them to do anything else will just result in negative attitudes about anything that's going on. They can neglect education or their job, depending on how old they are and what stage of life they're in. The more they neglect things, the worse it becomes. They can eventually even lead to unemployment if they just decide to play video games to the point where they don't want to go even attend their job or do any schoolwork, or procrastinate until it's too late and not give really any effort in doing their schoolwork. On top of this, the lack of physical activity that playing games causes can result in mental and general medical conditions. Because when you're playing games, all you're doing is just sitting on a couch, and the more you do that, the more out of shape a person's body gets. And these are the main problems of why video game addiction is such an issue, and it will only continue to get worse as more and more video games are being produced and they become more common in our modern society. Of course, this means it's going to be important to figure out how to solve the problem, and one of the most, I think, obvious ways of keeping this problem from happening in the first place is through the feature of parental controls on devices. A lot of devices have these, mostly handheld devices like tablets or iPads or iPhones, things like that. Parents can set their child's controls to where the device limits its own amount of time that it can be played. So after a child uses the device for so many hours per day, it'll shut itself down until the next day. You can also keep track of how long a person's been playing certain games, and you can keep track of their activity and see what they've been doing. Then the problem is with that is eventually the child might find ways to bypass these parental controls, such as somehow finding out the password and accessing all of the parental controls, and basically they can just turn them off. And as a person gets older, this becomes more of a possibility, so parental controls, if they haven't worked, will become less and less effective. And because of this increasing problem, there's actually been an increase in video game rehabilitation centers, which, like I said, are becoming more and more common and more of a viable option. Sometimes these rehab centers can actually reveal underlying problems of video game addiction. An author in the National Rehab Directory by American Addiction Centers actually said that the therapy and counseling offered at a rehab center may help compulsive gamers identify underlying reasons for their behavior, such as depression or anxiety disorders or anything else, and once identified, those can be treated. So parental controls, rehabilitation centers, those are two very viable options for preventing or recovering from video game addiction if it's already developed. And I think that these solutions will need to be put into play the more this becomes a problem. And if we can figure out how to prevent this more easily, then I think it would just improve society overall. As this becomes more and more of a problem, solving it will become more and more urgent. So that's my whole presentation, and thanks for watching.